Hello everyone, welcome to my channel and thank you for taking the time to watch this video. This is the first episode in my Gemstones and Crystals video series. I did an introduction video on it, so I hope you have given that a watch and I hope you've enjoyed it. I did discuss on how to introduce gemstones and crystals into your life and I hope you have enjoyed that video. Today I'm going to talk about some properties of the crystal, and we're going to be discussing crystal structure. So crystals have been used for over 30,000 years that we can document. It started off in ancient Sumeria and it was used in ancient Egypt. It was used in the Indus Valley civilizations, and all these people used crystals for their healing benefits as well as for their adornment properties. They tended to use a lot of clear quartz, turquoise, emeralds, carnelian, lapis, crystals that you could actually just find on the riverbed or find on the ground. And they made jewelry out of this, which they wore for healing purposes. In the 1900s, things changed a little bit. Science became more prominent, and people tended to use crystals now for their adornment purposes rather than the healing purposes. So when medicine became more prominent, people abandoned crystals, the use of crystals for healing, and tended to rely on pills and medication rather than using any kind of energy healing techniques. And everything else that was associated with crystals that was not scientifically based was labeled as pseudoscience and really abandoned. In the 1970s, things changed though. The new age of belief systems came in. People started doing a lot more meditating, and they started using crystals again for these qualities that are associated with their vibrations. And now it seems these days as enlightenment or ascension of the mind is taking more prominence, people are starting to go back to using crystals not only for healing and meditation but also for raising that vibration as well, and they're really starting to reap the benefits of crystals. And it seems like there's more now a demand for those lesser known crystals rather than the common diamonds, emeralds, rubies that they used to be. So it seems like the prices of those gemstones are actually falling because the demand for it is actually going down. So that's something to bear in mind. So I'm just going to start off with the basics, and we're going to just talk about how the structure, what is the structure of the crystal. And first of all, I'd like to say that start you off from real basics and talk about energy. And the whole universe is made up of energy. It's everywhere. We are energy, and the universe is really energy. This energy doesn't like to be just lying around. It likes to organize itself because the universe likes predictability at the end of the day. So it has organized itself into really complex little units that we call atoms, and I've got a little ball here to represent the atom. And this is really an organized form of universal energy that's packaged really nicely. And the universe is very practical, so it can take this little unit and start building things up with it, and that's what it does with atoms. This is how you and I are built up, and this is how the planet is built. Everything is made up of atoms. And when atoms join together, they're known as molecules. So everything is made up of atoms and molecules. So what has this got to do with gemstones and crystals, you might ask me? Well, when the earth first started, everything was all molten rock. It was all liquid rock, very hot, bubbly stuff running all over the place. There was no structure. And then the molten rock began to cool on the surface, and that surface, I've got a little diagram that I've drawn over here, so I hope it's adequate. You've got the surface of the earth here, the earth's crust, that's cooling down, and you've got molten rock forming the heart of the planet there, and this molten rock coming up to the surface over here, erupting from the volcano, going over the surface of the earth and cooling. And as it's cooling down very slowly, it starts forming crystals. Now crystals are formed because the atoms, which were initially very disorganized, start decreasing their energy levels. They can't run around too much anymore because the temperature goes down. They don't have enough energy, and what they do is they start organizing themselves into structures. This is represented here, into little structures, little units rather, that start repeating themselves, and this is how the crystal is formed. So the crystal itself is actually made up of little repeating units that extend in 3 dimensions, so up and down, left and right, and they form structures, solid structures. And this repeating pattern is called the crystal lattice. So this a single unit, which is a very organized structure, will repeat itself many times and form a big solid piece, which will be known as the crystal lattice. Now, this lattice structure itself is quite hard. If you look at diamonds, it's very, very difficult to actually break a diamond. So it forms quite a solid structure, and it's quite a stable structure. It's been around for millions of years, so you can imagine how long it has lasted. Some of the crystals are pretty strong, and there are areas where there are weaknesses in the crystals itself, where the forces are not so strong, so we can actually cleave or break the crystals into planes, and this is when you get faces that appear on the crystal itself, so flattened areas that become the crystal faces themselves. These faces of the crystals allow light to get into the crystal. So the molten lava that we started off with when we made the crystal was opaque, and once the crystal starts forming, some of them become clear, or they allow light to go through, and this is when you get these beautiful gemstones with beautiful luster and beautiful brilliance, and this is because the crystal has changed its structure, and it is now allowing light to come through. So there are gaps within the crystal structure itself that allow the light to come through. Now this is a model of a square crystal that I've managed to get done. So this is one of the basic models of a square crystal, and you can see the atoms within that structure are very, very organized, and you can see it's very stable. You've got an atom in the center there that makes the crystal pretty hard. There's also a lot of gaps that's going to allow the light to come into the crystal. This is another example of a crystal, and this is a hexagonal crystal itself. You can see there's also a lot of stability there, but also a lot of space that will allow light and energy to enter the crystal itself. And again, you'll have repeating units of this hexagonal crystal, and that in itself, the overall crystal itself, will turn out to be hexagonal as well. Now what I have done is I've just drawn some real quick diagrams of the basic structures of crystals over here, so you can have a look. So I'll just take these out. So there are a few varieties, a few classes or families that crystals occur in. You get a triangular arrangement of the molecules. You get a square arrangement. You can get a trapezium, a rectangle, rhomboid, parallelogram, and finally the hexagonal shape. So it's a very limited ways in which these crystals can organize themselves, but these are the basic structural crystals that are, or the basic families of crystals that are around. And as we go through individual crystals, you will see that they will fall into one of these categories. One of the types of crystals will fall into one of these categories, and this gives them their shape and their structure as well. Now I'm just going to show you very quickly the different types of crystals that I have. These are raw crystals, and you can actually see the structural crystal over there. So you can see this is more based on the square. You can actually see the crystal itself there within this rough crystal. There are planes where the crystal has got weakened bonds, and this makes this crystal pretty brittle, so it will end up breaking quite easily. You'll be able to cut it or break it apart or cleave it very easily. This is how the crystal grows. You can see they grow quite close to each other, and each structure is made up of repeating units, those repeating hexagonal units. This is a hexagonal crystal, so as I've shown you here, this crystal is actually this hexagonal unit that is repeating and making up this particular crystal. I have another crystal over here that is showing you, this is more of the square variety. You can see that, and this is also, it's also quite brittle, because the forces holding between the repeating units are not as strong. So you can get the crystal sliding, the units sliding off each other, and this makes them weak at that particular plane, and that allows us to break off pieces of crystal from the actual structure itself. It also we use this as an advantage, because this is how we're able to shape the gemstone or shape the crystal into jewelry, and use it for our purposes. This is a selenite crystal in itself, and it's very, very brittle. You have to be very careful on how you handle it, but you can see that it is all made up of the square crystal variety, and you can see there's that face, the plane which is exhibited, and this plane face will allow, it's usually the side, the edge of the crystal, that will allow the light to go in. So where the raw materials are opaque, not allowing light to go in, the actual crystal structure itself does allow light to go through. I've got another crystal over here, and this is just another variety. This is another raw crystal, and you can see them growing from the bedrock over there. So there's the evidence of volcanic rock there, where the crystal was formed when the volcanic rock cooled down. So you've got a little bit of lava rock over there attached to it, and the crystals are growing from it. I've got a really nice specimen over here. This is peridot. Quite rare to get, and you can see this very, very clearly here with volcanic rock all around the peridot there. So you can see there was volcanic activity, and then you can see the crystal growing within the volcanic rock itself. So these crystals have all been formed under high temperatures and high heat, and it's taken a long time for them to form. It's quite rare to get a peridot crystal together with this volcanic rock around it. And finally, this is another crystal that has grown on the, you can see there's some clear crystal, quartz crystal, and you've got this lovely blue crystal growing from a bedrock over there, or growing after a volcanic activity. These are slightly smaller crystals, and these are very, very brittle. They tend to break into pieces very, very easily. Now, we don't use crystals that are very, very brittle. I will discuss hardness of the crystal. So the hardness varies from crystal to crystal. We do tend to prefer to use the harder crystals for jewelry, so that our jewelry lasts for years and doesn't fall apart and break. This is black obsidian as well. So this, you can see it's got a nice shiny surface over there, and this is one of the crystals that is pretty hard that you can use. And this is a rough of the black tourmaline crystal. Now you can actually almost see the crystal structure going through it. They've cut it into pieces over here, but you can see that it's still, you can still see the crystal structure there going through the beads. You can see the faces on the crystal over there. It's very fine, but it is there. So this is part of that. This needs to be polished. These crystals need to be polished in order for you to use them, because they're quite uncomfortable if they're unpolished. And you can see there's also evidence of other crystals being growing together with this black tourmaline crystal as well. So these are just some of the crystals that I have that are raw. I don't tend to collect them because they do break very easily and they don't last that long. This is a cross section through the crystal, and you can see there are two types of crystals here, a quartz crystal in the middle over here, and a nice little blue agate going on around it there. So these are just some of the crystals that I have, and this is how crystal structure allows the crystal to be hard. These black tourmalines, once they're polished up, they don't break very easily, and they are quite hard, and you can make them into jewelry. This is a polished black obsidian crystal here, and you can see it's pretty hard. There's no area where it's going to crack or break, and this will last for a very, very long time. I've got a black tourmaline here as well, and you can see this is pretty hard, and it's going to last for a pretty long time as well. So the characteristics or the hardness of that crystal, or the use of that crystal, will depend on how hard it is, its crystalline structure, and whether or not it's allowing light to go through it. So depending on how much space there is, how stable that crystal is, lends to its popularity. The softer crystals that tend to break or have a very weak crystal structures, where the connection between the repeating units is very, very, very weak, don't tend to be used that much because they break so easily. So we are very dependent on how the crystal has been formed, and in order for us to use it and to get its maximum benefits. So I'll discuss in later videos the different hardnesses of the crystals, and the different scales that they use to measure hardness of crystals. So I do hope that this video has been quite informative, and you've learned a little bit about crystal structure, got to know about what is going on within the crystal itself, and I hope you've enjoyed this video. And please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave me some comments. I'd love some feedback from you, and thank you so much for watching. Take care now. Goodbye.